This is a ship in a bottle. It took 10 whole hours to make, and I'm gonna show you the difference between this and a 1 hour ship in a bottle, all the way down to a 10-minute ship in a bottle. Now, this isn't about photorealism or perfection. Instead, I'm going for a more gamified look. Think PlayStation 2 Ratatouille,
Excusez-moi, I am Chef Auguste Gusteau.
not Horizon Zero Dawn. I got the idea of making a ship in a bottle from a scene in the Pirates of the Caribbean 4. There's this one shot of a shelf filled with ships in bottles, and all the ships are animated. You know, this scene right here. Now, I'm not Disney at all, but I thought, what if I made my own? Plus, this was a complex enough project to make an interesting video and a sick thumbnail. Before diving in, I set some ground rules. 1. I have to model everything from scratch. No pre-made assets. 2. I can use free textures, but that's it.
Yeah, boy.
3. The time limits are strict. 10 minutes, 1 hour, and 10 hours. However, there's one caveat. I could pause the timer whenever I wanted, especially for the 10-hour challenge. Don't get me wrong, working for 10 hours straight is definitely doable if you're not me. Plus, this gave me the flexibility to stay focused and avoid dumb mistakes like forgetting to save or, putting the ship in the bottle. With these rules in place, I was ready to jump in. Or so I thought. First, I realized I knew absolutely nothing about ships, so I spent some quality time with Google, looking up ship diagrams and breakdowns of ship anatomy. Hulls, masts, sails, cannons, there's a lot of parts. Here's the list of parts I jotted down. The hull, because you need something to keep everything afloat. The masts and sails, these make the ship actually move. The deck stuff, like cannons, barrels, ropes, and other piratey things. And the bottle itself, because, well, this is a ship in a bottle. Looking at this list, I knew one thing for sure. The 10-minute model was going to be a disaster. With that being said, I started with the 10-minute model. Yeah, well, this was expected. I mean, if you squint really hard and use your imagination, you might see a ship. Even then, if you actually see a ship, you have issues, okay? I'm sorry. Here's how it went. I started with the basic hull shape, added some cylinders for masts, and slapped on a few flat plates for sails. No textures, no details, nothing. The whole time, my hand was cramping up from all the keyboard mashing. Is it good? Absolutely not. Moving on. Next up, the 1 hour model. This is where things started to get interesting. Here's the play-by-play. I began with the bottle, which took about 15 minutes, probably too much time, but I wanted it to look decent. Then I moved on to the ship, starting with the hull. The hull is like the foundation of the ship, so I wanted to get it right. After that, I added the masts and the rim of the hull. It was starting to look like an actual ship. Then came the sails. These were fine, not amazing, but they got the job done. For some added detail, I made a grate thingy in the middle of the deck, like the ones you see in Pirates of the Caribbean. I then used that same grate to create climbing ratlines. These took way longer than expected and they still looked like shit. With 8 minutes left, I decided to add the barrels and the captain's wheel. And then I realized I forgot to put the ship inside the bottle.
No. No fucking way.
By the end of the hour, it actually looked like a ship. A very basic ship that could definitely use an hour or two, but not too shabby overall. Finally, we get to the big one, the 10-hour model. This was serious business, and I had a plan. 5 hours to model, 2 hours to texture, 3 hours to animate, and finalize. By the way, I didn't manage to animate it because my PC would have exploded. Just thought I'd let you know. Before starting, I made a list of textures I would need and downloaded them from AmbientCG, as well as a PNG of the Jolly Roger that I would later use on the sails. This time, I started with the hull of the ship, adding details like stairs on the deck and railing. Then I cut out holes for the cannons and added a jib sails mast. The 2 main masts came next, complete with beams and platforms halfway up. For the sails, I used cloth physics and some wind to shape them. It took forever, but the result was worth it. Once the sails were done, I got into the little details. Barrels, cannons, cannonballs, a captain's wheel, crow's nests, rat lines, and guide ropes. The ship started to actually look like a ship, for a change. After that, I modeled the glass bottle and the stand, making sure this time to actually put the ship inside. Modeling was finished in 5.5 hours. Moving on to texturing. Texturing was straightforward but very time consuming. I started with the bottle and stand, then moved on to the ship. Now, not everything is textured perfectly, and if you had to examine things up close, you would find a lot of stretching and mistakes. But when you look at it from a distance, you wouldn't be able to tell, and that's what's important. Now, the ocean inside the bottle was a beast of its own. I played around with the ocean modifier to create, well, the ocean, and I hooked all the ship bits to an empty. Then applied some constraints to the empty to make the ship float on top of the ocean. But the ocean looked like absolute I had spent 30 minutes making an ocean that looked awful. At this point, I thought about giving up, but complaining doesn't do much for me, so I locked in and figured it out. By the final hour, my PC was on life support thanks to all the simulations. Rendering animations was out of the question, so I settled for some still renders instead. The end result? A model that's half decent, but a big step up from earlier attempts. Now, let's compare all 3 side by side. The 10-minute model doesn't even look like a ship. Get this thing off my screen. The 1-hour version is definitely a ship, but it could use a couple more hours of love and care. And the 10-hour model? It's half decent, the kind of ship you'd hesitate to board, but still admire from a safe distance. If you've enjoyed watching me suffer, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Next time, I might try a 100-hour version